Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for this tech workshop, brought to you by Astral Aviation Consulting on behalf of the UK Civil Aviation Authority. If you want to stay in the loop with events and resources, please do sign up to our mailing list. You can do this by going to our website, www.astralaviationconsulting.com, or use the link that's just appeared in the chat box. Signing up also gives you access to the replay of this workshop and a whole host of other safety resources. This evening, I've got a good panel with me, some familiar faces, I think you'll agree, for those of you that have been before. I've got Matt Lane, Nigel Wilson, and Dave Lewins joining me this evening. Matt, if you don't know already, is a head of training and an active single and multi-engine FI and FE. Nigel is also a head of training, an FI, FE, and also a display pilot. And he also runs Easy PPL Ground School, which provides online courses for student pilots, licensed pilots, instructors, and training organizations. Dave joins us from Gloucester this evening, where he is a freelance CPL and PPL helicopter instructor. He's also the chief instructor and owner of Eagle Flight Training, a PPLA flying school, flying DA-20s and 40s. It's also a specialised ground training school for teaching PPLA and PPLH exams. So I think we've got most bases covered with the team. Good evening, everybody.
Hi.
Over the course of the next hour, we'll break this workshop down, as we all normally do, into easily digestible chunks. What we're going to cover is SkyDemon. We're going to then move on to Garmin 650, 750, and 1000. Then we'll finish off with electronic conspicuity aids before finally moving on to Q&A, which, as always, we'd love you to take part in. So if you do have any questions, please do add them to the Q&A box, which I've been told to say is separate to the chat box, and then we'll cover those either at the end of each section or at the end. Okay, so we're talking about SkyDemon, Garmin, and a bunch of EC devices this evening. So I'd just like to point out that other devices are available. Other brands clearly are available for use. The ones we're going to talk through tonight are not necessarily endorsed by us or by the CAA any more than any other brand. We've chosen this selection as they're the most common bits of kit that the team use on a day-to-day basis. However, the advice will be appropriate for anybody using other devices. For example, remembering to look out is universal no matter what navigation device we're using. What I would say, though, is if you have any personal top tips for any devices not mentioned, please feel free to share them in the chat box. And also, if you want some specific help with something, then do please get in touch. Okay, right. So to kick us off then, as ever, I'd like to find out who's with us tonight. So if you're watching live, this poll will pop up on the screen. If you're watching on demand, you won't be able to interact, but please do test your knowledge with the subsequent polls that come up as we go. So who do we have this evening? Are you a PPL student, a license holder, a lapsed license holder, or someone that doesn't fall into those three categories? Let us know who we have on the call. I think we're tracking about 880 signups this evening, so hoping for about 500 of you out there this evening. So are you a PPL student, license holder, lapsed license holder, or somebody else? Let's have a look at the results, please. Good stuff. Right. So a handful of PPL students, mainly license holders this evening, a few lapsed license holders, and a couple of others as well. So mainly license holders. So welcome to everybody as ever. Right, that's enough rambling from me. I'm going to hand over to Dave now, who's going to crack on with SkyDemon.
Thanks so much. Yes. Good evening to all of you. Before we get into detail on it, let's start with a quick poll as well. So if we can look through this question for you, what altitude is displayed in flight when using SkyDemon? Height above ground level, AGL, GPS altitude, height above mean sea level relative to 1013, altitude above mean sea level relative to QNH of the day. A, B, C, or D. Give you a couple of seconds on that. Let's take a look at the answers. GPS altitude is obviously, I say obviously, the correct answer. It has only GPS information. It doesn't, it can get other feeds, but the altitude that it gives you is GPS derived. It does have a useful height feature, that you can select the height instead of the altitude. If you touch the altitude box, it will turn into height, which it then, of course, because it knows where you are, it can tell you your height above the ground, which is very useful, especially for helicopter pilots going around 500 foot or whatever. I had a recent CAA audit, and I asked the inspector to confirm whether we actually need a paper map in the aircraft now. We certainly have to train students to navigate using maps and first principles, because it's still in the PPL syllabus, and CPLH for that matter. But the inspector explained that the rule is only that you have to need, you only need an up-to-date backup source of nav data. Although actually he was saying that they still have to promulgate that officially, but that's certainly what they're saying. So actually a second tablet or a phone with a reliable internet connection, don't forget, and an up-to-date navigation database, and preferably with the active route running on it in case the primary device overheats, which they do, and preferably running on a power source so that the battery doesn't run out. So that's from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Anyway, on to the first slide. Thanks very much. So I'm sure many of you have used or use SkyDemon or some other electronic nav devices. I'm personally going to concentrate on SkyDemon because I use it every day commercially around the UK and Europe, both training and I fly a lot of complicated aerial photography details in and out of controlled airspace in both aeroplanes and helicopters. And frankly, I couldn't work without it these days. It's excellent, really excellent. As is Airbox, very similar sort of thing that gives you the map capability to zoom into an OS style map. But in the past, we obviously used maps, and we still carry them. But I've carried the same, well, updated maps in the bag for many years now, and we never pull them out because we actually fly with 4 iPads running SkyDemon concurrently, just in case I've got to pick another one up. And I have actually in the past been down to my last one while we've been fixing the others. So you do need to make sure that you are aware when you're using these. If they die, then you need to know where you are to keep yourself out of trouble. I have used other similar apps. It's absolutely down to personal preference. I'm not pushing SkyDemon over the others. Others are available. Simply, I don't have as much experience with them, but I do find it very stable and very easy, and especially user-friendly in very complex situations in controlled airspace. And it gives you the horizontal as well as the vertical view, which is very useful. And you can see the airspace coming up vertically as well. And also when I'm instructing for the instructors out there, I personally use it as a debriefing tool as well. So after the flight, I can show and remind the student where we flew and how we flew, exactly what height we were at or whatever. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it helps my recall and their recall of the flight ready for the debrief. And I find that particularly useful. And also, for instance, how accurate their circuits are and if they're consistent, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, onto the initial setup slide, please. Moving on to the nitty gritty of how we use it. Firstly, you need to set up your aircraft accurately using the aircraft tab. Remember, you can do this on a PC as well as on your app. Or you can do it on your phone or your iPad or the PC, and they have it for the Mac as well now. That took a while, but they now do. And you can set it all up, and then as long as you're logged in on each device, then you can, once you've saved the route, you can call it up on any of them, or you can use the share route tab to send it across to the other devices very instantly, which is fantastic. It's usually only necessary to set up your aircraft once, but it's really well worth that time spent to get the accurate fuel usage, etc., for your planning, and the weight and balance, of course. And I would use your AFM, your aircrew flight manual, to go through the detail and make sure you're looking at not your generic aircraft, but yours specifically from your load sheet. And you can add all the appropriate performance power settings and weight and balance data. Once it's correct, it's all ready to go. And you'll immediately see, once you've planned a route, whether you're overweight or fuel limited, because it will highlight it for you. There's 2 global setup options available via setting and mapping tabs. You can select the type of map you like, either topo, displaying roads, railways, types of airfield, that kind of thing. Appropriate levels, whether you want to reduce airspace above you, for example, if you're not interested in anything above 4,000 feet, for example. And classes of controlled airspace, if again, you're not going to be, you don't want it too cluttered. So just have enough information on it so that you see the information that you want. And that goes for any app, of course. You can display the NOTAMs graphically so that you can see them around the route and be able to click or hover over them and get the detail from it. And you can also change the units you want. With the weather options, they're very good. I like personally to display rainfall to get an overview. It shows you a bit like in the Windy app, where you've got the rain coverage actually showing in different colors as it gets thicker. I use that for when I'm planning, and then for when I actually use the overlay while I'm flying as well to show the live rainy areas when I'm flying. The METARs and the TAFs are selectable on or off, and then you can click on them. The wind arrows are also very useful, and you can see those while you're planning, get a feel where the wind is, how strong it is, and their airborne use as well. Then you need to select create route, and either a local flight within a range, for example, of where you're starting from. So you could say Gloucester with a 20-mile ring or a 50-mile ring, or you select a landaway. So local flight gives you a range ring of your range, just for easy viewing, inside which you can just see the relevant NOTAMs, etc. for your flight. Landaway means you can select a destination, which then gives you a direct track as an initial idea of the bigger picture. And then you can drag the route to make it safe and flyable, dodging around danger areas or whatever, higher ground if you want to go up valleys or whatever. Bearing in mind all the airspace and NOTAMs and the weather and fuel and time while you're doing your planning. There's also an excellent simulator function, which you can use to fly your entire route if you want to, including an approach. And while I'm on the approach, you've got VFR and IFR approaches with SkyDemon now. So you have to enable the IFR features, but then you will actually get your position overlaid on an approach plate. And that is phenomenal. I think that's really, really excellent. You've got to pay a lot of money to do that within Garmin. But it comes with the package with SkyDemon. On to the next slide, please. Navigation. So for my own nav work, either navigation training or aerial photography, I just pick my own start airfield. Here you can see Fair Oaks at the bottom center of the screen. And then I click on each turning point or photography site as a round robin in straight lines initially, and then back to my base, perhaps via a landaway airfield for a natural break or fuel, like this one from Fair Oaks via Nottingham, and then eventually back to Fair Oaks. And once you've put all the points in, you can then click on, for example, here Nottingham, right click on it and use the land here function. And then that splits the route into 2 separate routes, two separate actual routes with a start and finish. And then each one you click on will become the active route. And then when you come to download or print a pilot log, you will then have a separate log for each stage of the flight. And that I find that very useful. Obviously, it's excellent for commercial work. Once you're in flight, you want to select the next route. You either have to select do not land here on the routing options, or stop navigating, select the next route, actually click on it to make it dark magenta instead of light magenta, and then start navigating again. There's no way that I've found. Someone might correct me and say, oh no, actually Dave, there is a way of doing that. I haven't found it yet. So sometimes you do have to come out of it and go back into it. But they are coming up with new features all the time. For example, you couldn't used to drag and drop the route once you were flying to reroute. You had to click on a new point and then insert it in the route. And sometimes you could hit a pen to route and that would get confusing. Now you just have to click on it and it'll change color, and then you can drag it and let go as though you were doing a new plan. So that's a new feature that they've done recently. As you get within 20 miles of a landaway airfield, you can select the arrival. It'll say select approach down in the bottom right-hand corner. And once you do that, then you can select the active runway, type of approach, or rather the join you intend to make, overhead or direct base or whatever. And the map will then show you arrows which display suggested routings to join, as I say, downwind, overhead, long finals, etc. And then as you zoom into the airfield, you'll also see the noise sensitive areas and preferred circuit routings to help appease locals, which obviously we want to try and do as far as possible. You're encouraged to add the pilot's notes, which are also very helpful for the next people that are wanting to go there. And they show landing and handling fees, fuel prices, procedures and processes, and how well they were greeted even by the airfield management. So sort of to encourage new people to go there. Before I fly, I always print out a plog. I use the create briefing function, and that gives you the NOTAMs of where the page is and also the weight and balance. The plog's incredibly handy for taking notes, writing clearances, frequencies, squawks, etc. And it lists all the en route frequencies, listening squawks, nav aids, as well as the derived nav plog information using drift corrected heading and speeds, safety altitudes and timings. And of course, just in case the system fails, you've got to revert to a trusty map. Before the engine starts, you select the go flying button, and then you log the engine start so that now it's recording, and then you can select off blocks when you taxi, and the magic happens. The log starts once you're airborne. You can follow your carefully planned magenta line. That brings me on to route study. Really can't stress enough the power of route study after you've planned and before you go flying, looking really carefully along each leg of the route in detail so you know what to expect to see in flight. So you're looking and interpreting a map so that when you get to a point, you know exactly what you're looking at. And SkyDemon is just as good at that as a normal map. It's very good. And so it sort of minimizes surprises that you might not have previously considered if you haven't done your route study. So when the weather does deteriorate or you get a refusal of clearance to go through controlled airspace, then you've got a plan ready to go before you get there. So prior planning prevents poor performance, as you know. It's so true. It will save you a lot of headaches and stress, not to mention violations if you actually get caught out. As you approach your landing airfield, the runways appear, as I say, so you can use those. Back to the flight, you can set SkyDemon to notify out loud any airspaces or terrain or even other aircraft if you connect to a third-party TIS device, which is extremely useful, and I certainly do that. Matt's actually going to cover that later in the workshop later. But remember, these only show aircraft which are capable of transmitting such information, so they can't be considered infallible. So you've still got to use your lookout. As you approach controlled airspace, if you want to know detail around any point on the map, you can just touch the screen, click on information. That will give you a frequency, and then you can apply for your zone transit or ask for your zone transit or clearance. And you can get any other info you need, like a METAR and plates. let's say you are denied access, or they tell you you're going to have to hold, so you can't get a direct clearance, and you decide to route around it instead, then if you're going to use the function rather than dragging, then you've got to use insert route rather than append to route. Otherwise, you get some very weird. You can literally lose your route and it'll go back the other way. If that happens in the air, the best way out of it is to stop navigating, start navigating again, and it will reset. And as soon as it does, it will take you back to where you were without the changes. Only other thing I would point out is really the preference, and it's a personal one, of whether you use track up or north up. You just have to point at the little aircraft symbol. I personally like north up because it just gives me an entire situational awareness of where I am. Some people certainly like track up if they're thumbing their way down a map, because it gives you left and right. So I'm not going to push either of those. I personally use track up wherever I am, because when I'm going round and round in circles on an aerial photography detail, it's very easy to get to lose where north is. So I find that very useful. Onto flight recording and playback. After the flight, everything's saved. You can simply select logs, where you can find all your past flight logs, assuming you've saved them. You can back them up to the cloud. It will save it automatically, sorry, but if you want to save it to the cloud, then you've got to tell it to do that. And that backs it up onto the cloud under your account. And then you can open those in SkyDemon, or you can open them in Google Earth, or you can even fly through them in Google Earth if you want to literally replay your flight in 3D, which is impressive. If you've got a big screen and you want to do that, you can see the entire route as you're going up a valley or whatever. You can also create a debriefing pack, which generates a PDF with the map, a virtual radar, which is an elevation side-on view, timings, and all the stats from the log, especially useful if questions are asked about your flight and you can look back at them in detail. Incidentally, of course, the CAA or the AEIB will also be very, very interested in that device. So just bear that in mind. It is very, very useful. It's only accurate unless it's lost tracking, of course, for a period. Does happen if the internet connection isn't stable enough, and you'll get gaps in it. There's also a maintenance option, allows you to merge two files together. So those two flights I did there from Fair Oaks to Nottingham, and then Nottingham back to Fair Oaks, you can then merge those together and they get saved as one log. Onto top tips and pitfalls. Just make sure you plan. Sorry, I just saw that flash up. Yeah, look out. Remember to look out. Top tips, pitfalls. Plan carefully. If you want to fly it with the simulator, certainly in your early days of using it, it's a very, very good tool. Go through it really carefully, noting all the areas. For example, what we in the Air Force used to call shark-infested custard. Any busy airspace where it just gets really detailed, those are the areas you need to really route study well. Make sure you've got the frequencies noted, etc., etc. Assume you won't get any direct routing, so just make sure you've planned alternatives. There's a reverse route which you can use before flight, and you can print out the plots, as I say, for the notes and clearances. If you happen to have, as I do, a Garmin subscription and to their various gadgets, I've got a GTN 650 and an Era 760 in the Katana. You can plan everything on SkyDemon, then you can export it, share it, it's called, to Garmin Pilot. And then when you get in the aircraft by Bluetooth or some magic, with the Connext card that I've got in the GTN 650, it will appear as if by magic on both Garmin devices. How it does that, I have no idea, but it does, and it's very clever. So you can do everything in the comfort of your home on your iPad. You could use Garmin Pilot as well, but I do find SkyDemon is just easier. So information on the SkyDemon is incredible, but it is distracting. So make sure you are up to date with it all. the frequencies, all of that stuff can get on the screen. You need to know how to get it out of the way quickly, usually just by clicking back on your route, and it'll dump whatever's around it, but you can easily get it back. So you need a work cycle to make sure you're doing things methodically, and SkyDemon isn't consuming all your attention. Tie your SkyDemon into your ADS-B device if you've got one to display traffic on the map while you're flying on SkyDemon. That's useful, but I've found in the past that can, I don't rely on it, but it is useful. When it's working, it works very well, but don't forget, it doesn't show all the aircraft. Height is another feature that I mentioned earlier. You can flip between altitude and height when you touch it to get GPS height over the ground. If you accidentally lose the route, remember, stop navigating, reopen the route, and then go flying again. Cross-check your backup devices, make sure they're up and running and with power supply should one of them fail. And then you can look at the end post-flight with the log function. So top tips and pitfalls, despite all of that, you've just got to continue to look out. I know this was a really quick blast through SkyDemon. I did go quite quickly through it. Feel free to get in touch with me if anyone wants any more advice on SkyDemon. But there are also excellent, really excellent video tutorials within SkyDemon in the help section. And there's also the simulator function. So I hope you've enjoyed that and found it useful. And I'm going to go back to Chris. Thanks, Chris.
Lovely. Thank you, Dave. Speaking of the SkyDemon video tutorials, there's a link will go into the chat box now, which will take you to a load of useful tutorial videos. And they're actually really good. So would thoroughly recommend having a trawl through those. Right, I'm going to cover off a couple of questions. Well, in fact, Nigel is at the end of this section as we go. So Nigel, can SkyDemon actually configure the aircraft you're flying on Sky Echo, or must you already have the latter set up for a particular aircraft and then you select it as the connection?
You have to configure if you fly multiple aircraft, then you can configure SkyDemon to have multiple aircraft. And then when you connect the device, SkyDemon, up to Sky Echo, if the Sky Echo device doesn't have the same registration in its configuration, then it prompts you, and you can then get SkyDemon to update Sky Echo with the current aircraft that you're using. If you're having a Sky Echo that's permanently sitting in the aeroplane anyway, and it never moves, then you don't really need to do that. You just connect to the device and away you go. So yeah, so instructors can use their own personal Sky Echo, as I do, across multiple aircraft, and I don't have to configure the Sky Echo each time. I just tell SkyDemon to use this aeroplane, and then SkyDemon, with a little prompt from me when I get asked about it, can then configure the Sky Echo device to match that aircraft.
Cool, thank you. I think there's a question from Philly Baxter. I think that's been answered by Andrew Kaminsky, thank you, which was, is it not the case that SkyDemon GPS and similar are to be treated as secondary nav aids and you must carry an up-to-date chart? Andrew's kindly added some stuff in there. Is there anything else to add on that one, Nigel?
No, other than to say that, legally, having spoken to the CAA, it's a good idea to have a backup device, because with threat and error management, a device is more likely to fail, as opposed to, if you think about the old days where we had a paper chart in the aeroplane. We didn't have a backup device of a paper chart, did we? But then the likelihood of that disintegrating or flying out the window than a device failing. So that's, it's all down to do with threat and error management. So, a device with an up-to-date database is a current chart. End of story. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And the last one for now from Ian. Do you rely on SkyDemon providing NOTAM information, or do you look at CAA approved sources for NOTAMs?
If you speak to the CAA, which I've done on several occasions, including I do a lot of infringement retraining as well, their view is that you should not rely on any third-party app to give you 100% NOTAM reliability. The only official source is the AIS website. So while SkyDemon is very good at it, it has had a few glitches in the past with its interpretation of NOTAMs and not quite displaying them correctly. But in my book, it's a good starting place, but it's always worth a quick check on the actual real AIS site, just to double check you haven't missed anything. And that's the CAA's official view as well.
Thank you very much. Right. Thanks today for that. Thanks, Nigel, for the questions. More Nigel now. Garmin.
Okay, right. So the big difference between SkyDemon or similar devices like that and the Garmin stuff that we're going to talk about is of course that the Garmin stuff is fitted into an aircraft. Okay, so let's have a quick look on the screen then for a quick poll just to start things rolling. And there we go. So what training are you legally, note the word legally, required to do before flying with an EFIS, which is shorthand for an electronic flight information system. In other words, a screen and presentation of flight instrumentation navigation. So here we go. Do you legally have to just do self-study of the flight manual or the equipment for the device concerned? Do you legally have to do difference of training by an instructor? Is there no mandatory requirement? Can you just do what you like? Or do you have to have a proficiency check with an examiner on the bit of kit that you'd like to use? So vote now, A, B, C, or D. And let's have a look at the answer then, shall we? So the correct answer is you legally must do differences training with an instructor. And the key thing there with differences is that you're supposed to go flying with it, or you have to go flying with it. Familiarization training is another term that's used. That's not the case here. Familiarization training is you can read the book, sit on the ground, talk about it, and then go fly it. But differences means you actually have to have a flight with an instructor who then signs it off in your logbook. Okay. Two things, there's particularly to do with EFIS, is that there are generally two types of sign-off. There's a VFR sign-off using the equipment, and there is an IFR sign-off using the equipment if you've got something like an IRR rating or an IMC rating or an IR rating. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the systems you can get then. So that screen is just a pretty picture of some of the Garmin stuff that you might get installed in an aeroplane. The top left is a Garmin 1000. That's you know, to do with mainly fitted into the larger aircraft, but even some of the sports, you know, sports light aircraft are coming with G3Xs and stuff like the right-hand top screen as well. So it's all becoming very capable and to a certain extent a little bit more affordable as well. So there's no way in 10 minutes I'm going to do justice on all of these systems. Okay, so let's get that straight, because they are hellishly complex systems with a lot to them. Okay, so the good news is that Garmin systems tend to use the same methodology between all of their products. So once you learn how to do something via a menu structure on one of the devices, generally it translates across to the other device as well. So let's dive in then. Let's have a quick look at the main display that we're going to be using for flying. That's called the PFD, or the primary flight display. And this particular thing is a Garmin 1000 that we're looking at here. It's a bit like flying a fish tank. That's the first thing to realize. Lots of people think, well, what happened to the standard T panel? It is still there, okay? Because here it is. If I try and draw it on the screen, let me just do it now, outline it in red. There we go. So we've got airspeed on the left, we've got the altitude indicator in the middle, we've got altitude on the right, and we've got direction information underneath. So even though you might think it's not a standard T panel, it actually is. The other things to bear in mind, just a few things we've got labeled there that we might want to go through. Importantly is that things like the airspeed indicator, we've got a digital readout. If you have an old steam gauge round dial, you wouldn't want to be chasing, or you wouldn't be chasing the last knot of airspeed. You know, if it's roughly looking at it that it's 160 knots, that's fine. So you should do the same with this thing here. Same with the altitude as well. Little things that catch people out. We've got the balance ball pointed up here. If I can quickly just draw on that one there. So this little thing here, okay, is the balance ball, the little rectangle underneath that triangle there. So it moves left and right. And the good thing is you know, when you're looking at the bank angle, then you can even see whether you need to put rudder in while you're looking at the bank angle instead of having to look somewhere else. The bit at the top, triangle at the top is called the sky pointer. That's the easy way to get accurate bank angles rather than using those wing bars those yellow wing bars which sit on the horizon. Okay. Other sort of main things, we've got a heading bug with some of this stuff we can use, so we can set the heading bug so that we don't have to remember what the heading was. We can bug it and then fly to that bug. The heading, it's a bit like, just a placeholder. We can also have an altitude bug as well at the top right there. And that's really useful, especially with regards to controlled airspace, because lots of these systems will give you audible warnings as well when you're plus or minus 200 feet away from your target altitude that you've set there, which of course can be a godsend if you suddenly find you've increased by 200 feet and you're about to go into controlled airspace. So you can use that little bug quite sensibly to give you an audible warning. So you can set it 300 feet, 300 feet below. So if you exceed your target by 200 feet, you've still got 100 feet left before you actually go into controlled airspace, and it's then warning you before you do so. There's a lot of information on this screen. Okay, some really useful stuff. The biggest benefit to this when people are doing cross countries is that little thing called a track bug, and that actually just indicates to you the actual track of the aircraft across the ground, which of course is usually different to the heading because of the wind. You've got another little window there just to the left of the HSI, as it's called, the horizontal situation indicator, that gives you the winds. Okay, so in this case, we've got a tailwind of 23 knots and a crosswind of 38 knots. And there's various presentation methods you can have that. So it's all useful stuff that the system gives to you, and that's all derived mathematically, the wind speed. It hasn't got a magic feed from Met officers or anything. It knows what the actual track of the aircraft is. It knows its ground speed. It knows its airspeed. And therefore, with all of that information, you can work out backwards what the wind is doing, and then you can present that in that way. Okay, COM1 and communications are at the top there as well. So you've got all the comms on this screen as well. On the top right, you've got navigation aids on the top left. And how you select those is with everything that you see on this screen here. So it really is a compact piece of kit, but it is quite complicated when you start to delve into it. Hence the reason why there's a VFR sign-off and an IFR sign-off. Right, so on to the next one, please. So this is the MFD. This is the partner to it. It usually sits on the right-hand side of the PFD. This is the one that does lots of the nav stuff and also contains the space for some of the other stuff that we might have with conventional gauges, such as engine management and temperatures and pressures and fuel and all sorts of things like that. Okay, so there's soft keys at the bottom of the screen. Those little triangles there, they're soft keys, so they're shortcuts, if you like, to various bits of functionality which the manufacturer thinks will be useful at this particular place which you are at. I'm just going to point you across to the right-hand side of the screen there, where we've got, let's just get rid of that one, where we've got this menu structure here. Certainly on some of the older systems, the menu structure on Garmin tends to work, they call it page groups and pages, but I tend to call it like a bit more like chapters and pages. So you can go through the menu by using that bottom right hand bezel, this one down here, to select either the chapters that you want and then individually the page that you want within that menu structure to get to where you want to be. And it is quite a complicated menu structure itself. Okay. So obviously it's a very capable system. The map that it shows obviously needs to be up to date. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And it can have lots of information shown, and also you can do stuff like declutter the screen, which you ought to use quite warily. And the same thing with SkyDemon, you can declutter SkyDemon as well, but that's not necessarily a good idea to hide airspace which is above you. So that's really about it, really on the MFD. So let's move on to the next one and talk about setup very briefly. The most important thing on the setup when you power these systems up is it comes to a splash page and it tells you the date of the navigation database. That's the important bit, really. There's lots of other things as well, but this is the one that is really, really important. because that contains all of the airspace on the maps and charts and things like that. And you will find that Garmin only release their data in line with the AIRAC cycle with the AIP. So the data is only ever going to be up to date for 28 days. So that's the bad news, before you then have to update the database once again.
Oh, Nigel's gone all frozen on us. Oh, he's back.
Oh, am I back?
You're back. You're back. Carry on.
Where'd you get to? So navigation database is really important. It goes in line with the AIRAC cycle. And Garmin updates it in line with that. So if it goes out of date, you need to still have an up-to-date aeronautical data source in the aircraft. So that could be that you've got SkyDemon, okay, and with an up-to-date database instead of this one, which is out of date in the aircraft itself. There's lots of other stuff to do with the setup itself. You can have pilot profiles, you can have your own personal preferences, like Dave was talking about, you know, track up or north up, and all of those things you can save to your individual profile if you've got an aeroplane that's got multiple pilots. These things are really, really capable. Okay, and you'd be a fool to go and try and fly one of these aircraft unless you had some instruction in it. And that's one of the reasons why we've got this mandatory differences training for EFIS. So let's have a quick look at the next slide then and talk about failures. So obviously, if we lose, oh, thank you. I wasn't wondering if I'd frozen, right? Failures generally are presented by the system in a very conspicuous way. You get big red X's through the various bits that failed, like airspeed or altitude and things like that. And ultimately, of course, you can also have a complete screen failure. So you can have a complete failure of the PFD, the one on the left, and then you haven't got any flying instruments. Well, you have, because there's a little red button in the middle here, and that's called the reversion mode. And that will force the PFD screen to be displayed on the MFD. So you do have reversion capability, if that's what it is. And then you start to get things like a little map appear in the corner of PFD, like you can see on the left over here. Okay, so the map appears there on the reversion mode. You've also have to have standby instruments, okay, conventional standby instruments in the aircraft as well, in case you lose the whole lot. Okay, so there is inbuilt redundancy into the system there, but bear in mind that there are a lot of gotchas when you have failure modes in these types of systems. You know, you might lose the autopilot, you might also lose COM1 and NAV1 when you lose the PFD. And if that's the one you were talking on, you need to know that and not wonder why it's suddenly gone very quiet. Okay, and the next slide then, please. So just to finish off with then, we go to jump to the next slide, thank you. So just to finish off, even the Garmin 1000 does have some capability of record, well, it has quite a good capability of recording flight data, which you can then play back in various modes and systems. So on the right-hand side are some of the places where you can take the information and use it and analyze it to see what's going on with the, you know, the engine or your flight and how good you are at altitude keeping in your flight data like that. Not all versions of Garmin 1000. I've been particularly talking about Garmin 1000, but equally we can talk about, you know, the other systems that we haven't mentioned so far, like the Garmin 650 and the 750. They all work in a similar way. You need something to record it on, so that's where the SD card comes in on the Garmin 1000. That's where it is highlighted in yellow in the middle of the screen, but it is very dependent upon software levels as to whether you can do this, and also where the menu structure is to actually enable it and to get the data back out of it again. Okay, but it is really important for debriefing and for improving your own performance as well. Okay, so next page, then if we just look at a few top tips and pitfalls, I'm really rattling through this, I'm really sorry, but we've got a lot to cover tonight. So top things there is make sure you use up-to-date Garmin aeronautical information. There's a gotcha there, okay, in the Garmin aeronautical information does not show you glider sites. Big problem. Okay, so be very, very careful if you just use equipment like this in the aircraft. Make sure you set the set time to UTC, because that's what we're going to use when we talk on the radio. Like I said earlier on, don't chase the numbers, don't chase the last knot or the last foot of altitude. Are very, very capable systems with lots and lots of options. Just because the options are there doesn't mean you have to use them, because you can end up with a screen full of information and you end up not being able to see the wood for the trees. So limit what you use to make your life easy that you understand. Altitude select, I've talked about that, having your altitude bugs selected, make it work for you. You know, even if you don't use the autopilot, you still get the audible warnings about when you are approaching or when you bust 200 feet outside of your altitude limit. Waypoint selection, you can put your own waypoints in the system. You can also use IFR waypoints here as well. Bear in mind, when we're VFR pilots talking to a controller and we've used an IFR waypoint in our plan, the controller isn't necessarily going to understand that IFR waypoint name, like Zanza or something like that. So still, when you're flying VFR, when you're using RT, just keep your RT to the normal, useful stuff. Like I'm 2 miles east of Colchester instead of Zanza, all right? And then the controllers don't have too much of a hard time. Very aware of your navigation source. That's to do with the information which sits inside the HSI, or the DI on stilts, if you want, so on steroids. The information that you have in there regarding the navigation aid, it can be from multiple sources. It can be the nav1, nav2, GPS. It could be a whole host of other things as well. And the number of times I've seen people flying the little needle in the HSI only to then realize that they weren't flying to where they thought they were because they're following the wrong navigation aid. The HSI is a really, really good bit of kit. It's a real step up from the DI. It makes your life easy. That's all I'm going to say there. Be aware of NavCom frequencies as well, and particularly how to change them, in particular on the setup of the system, because obviously you can select whether you have 25K separation, channel separation on the system, or an 833 channel separation. The time when you want to find out that you can't get an 833 frequency, when you need it, and then you can't work out how to set the system to use 833 frequencies, is not in the air. Okay, make sure you know how to do that before you go flying. And like I said, the bottom line there, these are very complex bits of kit. So you can practice it, get with an instructor that knows it inside out so they can show you all the tips and tricks. And there are various simulators available for all of this stuff. The Garmin itself produces a sim on an iPad for a 430, a 530, a 650, and a 750. And also there are third-party proprietary applications that run on iPad, generally speaking, again, on iPad, for the Garmin 1000 as well. So just make sure you keep up to date with stuff and practice it before you get in the air. Okay, sorry that's really swift, but we've got a lot to cover. And that's the final thing to say. Just because you've got all this stuff in the airplane isn't going to stop you crashing into one that's coming towards you that you haven't seen by looking at. And
Brilliant.
Over to Chris.
Thanks, Nigel. There's some themes here. Look out, look out, look out. That's obviously prevalent for both SkyDemon and Garmin and any bit of kit that you're looking at. And also the complexity of these things and the potential and the resources out there to be able to get familiar with them before going flying. So they're the two real themes for any bit of kit that you might decide to go flying with. So be familiar with it and remember to look out. I will save the questions on that until the end, if I may, because we are rattling through this. We've only got 10 minutes left and we're going to go into electronic conspicuity aids. So what we'll do is we'll round off the hour with Matt talking about EC, and then we'll carry on for questions. That'll take us into approximately an hour 15. So it'd be great if you can stay for those questions. If not, then feel free to pick them up on the replay, which will go out shortly after this if you are pushed for time. But we do want to do the questions some justice. So without further ado, I will hand over to Matt to talk about electronic conspicuity aids.
Thanks, Chris. That's nice, everybody. And I'll just mention as well, there's a few people were reaching for it, and quite a few of the questions referring to it on that bit. The requirement for differences training is in FCL 710, AMC 1 to FCL 710, and it's 3 parts of it. If you need to, it's electronic display of flight instruments. That's part 1. Used by the pilot in the primary reference for control. That's part 2 of the aircraft in flight. Part 3. Okay, so for example, a Garmin G5 would require the differences training. Having a GPS navigator box that is an electronic screen would not necessarily require, because you're not using it as the primary reference for control and flight. So I hope that clears up quite a few questions that we had for people there as well. But moving on to EC, we're just going to have our final poll of the night. So let's see, what's the minimum time it takes a pilot to spot traffic, identify it, realize it's a collision risk, react, and have the aircraft to respond. So this is, what's the minimum time you think pilot goes, I've seen something, oh, it's another aircraft, it's going to hit me, right, I need to do something to turn away, for example. 3 seconds, 20 seconds, 5 seconds, or 10 seconds. How quick do you think the average kind of human could react there? Let's have a look at the answers then. And the answer is D, and that's from Safety Sense Leaflet 13. And yes, a real good number of people got that right. But the takeaway there is it's a fair bit of time. If you want to count out in your head bananas or whatever you use, 1 banana, 2, up to 10 is quite a long time. So this is why we keep emphasizing all the time, look out. But we've got something that can hopefully help us in that, which is what we're going to talk about with electronic conspicuity. So on to the next slide, please. Now, it's an umbrella term for technology that can help pilots, and not just pilots, but unmanned aircraft users and also air traffic services as well. And what it's giving us is an awareness of what's in the surrounding airspace. And so, like I say, it can be fitted to aircraft, unmanned systems, ground systems there as well. They're all examples of part of the electronic conspicuity, the EC environment and infrastructure. Now, like I say, this can't emphasize this enough. It's just strengthening the principle of see and avoid. But what we're adding is the principle of detect and be detected there as well. But to be 100% effective, it would have to have 100% of the users operating in a block of airspace to be totally cooperative. So, you know, we have to bear that in mind as well. We're never going to get that 100%, not in the near term anyway. Now, why the CAA? Why the Department for Transport? What's the focus on this? Why is everybody bothered about this? Why is money being put into this? Well, EC can play a vital role in 3 key areas. It can enable and hopefully help the ongoing modernisation of the UK's airspace and route structure. It can help mitigate risk of mid-air collisions in Class G and perhaps infringements into controlled airspace as well. And hopefully it's going to go some way that we can get a safe and efficient integration of unmanned aircraft rather than us having segregation between us and the unmanned or the uncrewed community as well. But see and avoid, like I say, is still the foundation. So what kind of systems are available? So move on to the next slide. Now, the Department for Transport and the CAA do not recommend any specific advice. You may have seen that there is rebates and grants available, but what they do recommend is that pilots understand and consider the functional benefits and limitations of any of these devices. These are just some of the ones on the market. So we've got ADS-B capable out transponders, like the Trig one that you can see there. FLARM and Power Farm are both variations of FLARM, very common in the gliding community for many, many years. And 2 big players in the portable carry-on market are Pilot Aware, that's the Rosetta one that you can see depicted on the screen there, and Sky Echo 2 has also been a very popular ADS-B in and out device as well. So these are all types of EC device as well. But the important thing to come on here is that these systems are only traffic advisory systems. They're what we call TAS systems. They're not TCAS. So let's have a look at what these systems do and don't do for us here as well. So let me just explain the difference quickly. So TCAS is a formal implementation of the ICAO Airborne Collision Avoidance System standard. So it gives traffic information about other cooperating aircraft, and you get various symbols and displays on them as well. But it also tells you how to get out of the way if the other aircraft's cooperating. So with TCAS, the crew will be advised of a specific collision avoidance maneuver, usually in the form of descending or ascending or even staying level potentially as well. So that's TCAS. That's the typical things that you'll get in your airliners, your biz jets, and so on like that. What we're talking about here are TAS systems, and it's a very broad definition, and it covers all these other systems. So what it's going to give us is it will give us some idea of information as to where traffic is, but what it's not going to do is tell us how to get out of the way of it. It's not going to give us a collision avoidance maneuver or collision avoidance advice as well. And one of the things to take away is there's lots of data involved, there's lots of information being given, and there's all sorts of different warnings and alerts as well. So you really need to understand it here. I'm not going to go through this grid here, it's far too complex, and it would be a whole workshop in itself. But this is taken from some of the CA documentation. These are some of the devices, and this is what receivers can and can't see here. So you've got some greens which say cooperation, and you've got some reds and ambers where it's kind of conditional as well. So what's the takeaway here is you've got lots of different devices. Some can see each other's, some can't see each other's as well. So knowing this is very important. And it's a time that when you've got a system, you should also take the time to understand what it is and what it isn't telling you. And there is lots of confusion. I even had a discussion this morning with a misconception from an aircraft operating community as well about something. And some of these can be very subtle. It can be getting into what they call SILs, which is the integrity levels of GPS systems as well. So it can be very deep and very techy if that floats your boat. So moving on a slide then, let's have a look at interpreting the displays. Now, some of the devices, such as FARM, may have a built-in display, but many of the current EC solutions, such as POR, such as Sky Echo, require linking to a tablet navigation app, which Dave and Nigel have touched on quite nicely as well. So you might get displays like you can see on the right there, where you get a kind of top-down map view with other traffic on there, showing movement, showing relative height, showing some call sign information as well. Some of them also have more like a TCAS style radar display, like you can see on the left-hand side there as well. And some of the devices, you can actually split it. You could even use an old standby mobile phone, for example, to give you a radar display in addition to a tablet if you're in your own aircraft, and you can set it up as well. Understanding what these symbols and what these displays are telling you is something that you really need to learn on the ground, sat at home with the manual, with a coffee. Getting airborne is not the time to go heads down playing around trying to learn this stuff. Or if you do want to go and learn it in the aircraft, make sure you've got somebody else flying and doing the lookout while you learn this stuff. Please, whatever you do, don't try and go heads down and learn this stuff on your own in the air. Tempting as it is, I know it's very tempting to get drawn into these and do it as well. There's one just thing I want to quickly touch on though, is a common misconception that these kind of devices will show track geometry, where what it actually displays is the bearing of the other aircraft. I'll give a really quick example using that display in the middle there as well. So we're in the aircraft at the bottom there, and we've got an aircraft approaching from the right-hand side, perpendicular to our track, same airspeed and altitude on a collision course. Okay, so what would it look like on one of these TAS screens? Well, let's look at the situation and an associated display with some time-based positions showing. So we're in the aircraft, as we've said, and the numbers are where the aircraft are both at the same number, i.e. so at time 3, both aircraft will be at 3. Now, you can see here what happens is the other aircraft remains 45 degrees right of the nose, with the range continually decreasing. And if you plot that on the TAS screen in one go, it produces the picture shown. So the effect in reality is the contact moving diagonally down the screen towards us as we close together. Okay, so a lot of people sometimes think that you would actually see that aeroplane moving right to left as you would see in the top-down diagram. So remember, it's a radial diagram, so you get that diagonal movement in. So just bear that in mind if you're trying to turn and position it as well. It's quite difficult to explain in words, but perhaps if you're watching the playback on the video, you could actually talk that through, maybe even get 2 little model aircraft or 2 coffee cups and plot it and see how it would work. So moving on to the next and final slide on this, how to exploit these in your flying. We've already mentioned lookout here as well. I'm not going to labor that anymore, other than to say it is amazing just when you get these devices and when you get the apps, how drawn into it you get. You know, I'm the same. Nigel, Dave, I'm sure will say the same as well. Even now, when we get a new feature or get something interesting, I suddenly get that spidey sense in the back of my head thinking, my lookout's gone down. I haven't looked out 10, 15, 20 seconds. I've got drawn into the iPad. Even though we're consciously trying to do it, it's so easy to get drawn into it as well. I've suggested a work cycle there. Many of you will be familiar with lookout attitude instruments. You might want to update that to lookout attitude instruments TAS LAIT. So we keep the lookout going. We glance down at the attitude, that looks good. Check the instruments, yes, we're still on speed, still on heading. Have a glance at the TAS. Is there any threats? Is there anything warning me about there as well? And that's a work cycle you may want to consider using in your training or your flying. And where's your TAS screen going to be located? Buried at the bottom of the instrument panel or on your knee pad might not be the best side. Equally, putting high up on your eye line may interrupt your actual normal lookout scan as well. You can see here there's a variety of mounts. You see RAM mounts and other common makes of mounts, and that's a typical position there in that Cessna on the position there as well. And that may be a good thing. But you know, your aircraft is going to be very individual. You may have a stick, you may have other things, their window configuration. So see what works for you. But having it in a good scan position is really what you need to be doing, I suggest as well. And have a think about what you're going to do about this TAS information as well. When you get an alert of a conflict, what are you going to do? You're going to alter your flight path, you're going to carry on, you're going to climb, you're going to descend, you're going to deviate from track. And remember, when you start doing these things, you potentially bring in other threats as well. If you're going to deviate from track because of a high traffic area, suddenly you're potentially going off where you've planned. Are you introducing then an infringement error as well? And this is suddenly when the plan that you've got was good, you're now going to do something different in the air, and do you introduce other risks here as well? So again, a quick canter through, but key takeaways are, don't get drawn into it. Bring it, the vast majority of your work cycle should still be lookout and small glances down at attitude instruments and TAS, and have it mounted somewhere suitable and firmly mounted as well. There's a really good and quite shocking accident report out about a firefighting Chinook where the poor co-pilot in the right-hand seat, his iPad dropped and actually jammed the rudder pedal, and the firefighting Chinook crashed with some horrible consequences as well. That's the first one I've seen where an iPad device has jammed the controls and caused an accident as well. But it could happen to us as well. These are pretty rigid and inflexible devices, and if they get jammed somewhere, it could be quite unfavourable. Thank you very much. That's the end of that brief overview about thing. And as somebody has just said, I would like to say Bluetooth voice alerts there as well. I didn't go into it because of the time, but absolutely Bluetooth voice alerts, if you've got a headset that are capable and you can link it to your iPad, are massively effective. I fly with a Bose headset, links via Bluetooth to SkyDemon, and I get the oral alerts on traffic as well. And it's really, really effective and a really good way of keeping that lookout going and not getting drawn into staring at the screen. So thank you for mentioning that. Chris, I think we're into questions, just about on time for our hour's content.
We are, thank you. We've got through a whole boatload of questions already, with 17 of them. There's still some to go. So as I mentioned, we'll crack on and do as best we can for the next 15 minutes or so, conscious that we are busting greater than an hour. Before we do get into the questions though, there's been a bit of chat about Safe Sky. So Nigel, you're going to have a quick 2 minutes on Safe Sky for us.
I won't say 2 minutes. Safe Sky, I had a look at a little while ago, but bear in mind that Safe Sky requires an internet connection while you're in the air, and that can be problematic. So that's the only thing I was going to mention about Safe Sky, because it picks up the information. It does the same as Sky Echo, but it doesn't pick up the information itself. It actually does it via an internet connection to a server on the ground. So if you lose the internet connection, which invariably you will at some point as you fly through various bits of airspace and change your cells with mobile phone signals and stuff like that, then just be very careful with that one. When I looked at it, I had about a 2-minute delay between what I could see outside the cockpit and what was being shown on Safe Sky. That might have just been a bad day, but that's just a little bit of a thing to think about.
Cool, thank you. Okay, we've had one question sent in, that was from Peter, and this is about SkyDemon. He says, or he asked rather, what is the quickest way to find the nearest divert airfield from the intended route in an emergency? Matt, Nigel, Dave.
We'll all fight over. We were discussing this in the preamble as well. So if you go to the SkyDemon in flight, you have to be navigating. But if you click the SkyDemon globe, that's normally in the top left on your app, when you are navigating, it will then bring up the menus. And if you click direct to, it will bring you the list of nearest airfields with a little depiction of how long the runway is, and then even an arrow and a distance pointing towards it. It's a great function. And if you then want to go to one of those, you can click on it and it will do like a direct to as well. It's an excellent feature, but you have to be navigating for it to work.
Good stuff, thank you. This one is about differences training. It comes from Dan, and he asks, are differences training required for something like a G5? What about a GTN 650? Matt, over to you again, please.
So I think that was the one I answered earlier as well. A G5, yes, because it's used for primary control of the aircraft in flight. A GTN 650, no, because it's a GPS navigator system, unless, of course, you've got the G5s installed as the primary flight instruments as well there. Yeah.
Good stuff, thank you. David mentions that G3X has no simulator, but does have a demo mode, which is little publicized. Anyone got any experience in the G3X at all? Anyone comment on that? If not, we'll move on.
Not sure on the simulators, to be honest.
Okey-doke. And I think, actually, looking at that, that's about it. No more questions. Any more for any more? Quickly. Oh, no, sorry, Marcus has got one.
Just.
Oh, you're breaking up, Nigel.
Just to quickly mention, Chris, the thing about one of the questions earlier on was about SkyDemon hiding airspace about 4,000 feet above and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's a really important point, and it's called, you do it with decluttering. And I mentioned that on the Garmin 1000 as well, but basically you do not want to have airspace hidden from you, especially during the planning stage, okay? During the flying stage, then you might want to simplify your life a little bit and have it set so that it hides airspace which is in excess of, and for example, in excess of 2,000 feet above you. As you climb, as that airspace becomes inside that 2,000 foot margin that you've set, you will get warnings from SkyDemon, so it will still do its job. But the problem is, of course, is if you didn't know about that at the planning stage, you're now in for a bit of a tricky ride. And that's one of the big pitfalls that people fall off the perch with when they have infringement, even though they are using stuff like SkyDemon. And believe me, there's a lot of people that still infringe, even when they use SkyDemon as well. So just be very careful about that. My saying to people is, if you want to use declutter during flight, then you need to set it so that it's going to give you at least 2 minutes warning about airspace above you. So the setting that you need to have set needs in the number of feet, like 2,000 feet above you, needs to be at least twice the maximum climb speed of the aircraft. So if your aircraft goes up at 1,000 feet a minute, then the minimum you need to see above you is 2,000 feet above to give you that 2 minute warning. Okay.
I probably should have made it clearer. I was referring to helicopters, Nigel, on that, and we get nosebleeds if we go above 2,000 feet.
That's fine, yeah.
Great, thank you. Final question then I've got here is again from Dan, He's talking differences training again. One last bit of clarification, please. Do we need differences training between a G1000 and a G3X? Are you clear on that?
Yeah, once you've obtained EFIS differences training, as Nigel I think touched on, it's then familiarization training between the different types of thing. However, you would be strongly recommended to get airborne familiarization training if required, or at least sat in the aircraft or on a suitable ground simulator as well, because there is quite some differences between some of these as they've gone updated.
If you can imagine, if you've got a difference of sign off on a G5, which is a simple little device that is basically an AI and an airspeed and an altimeter, and then you go and fly an airplane that's got a Garmin 1000, there is a massive difference there between those two things. So just be very, very careful. Don't just take the legalistic view, take the pragmatic and sensible approach.
Cool, great, thank you.
It's just worth saying as well, there's quite a few questions I think on it sort of in the background as well, but I understand SkyDemon, you can have three logins, if you like, running concurrently on a login, only 2 of which can be mobile devices there as well. So if you've got, say, your home computer, iPhone, iPad, that would be fine. If you've got 2 iPads and an iPhone, that would, one of those will get logged out. So when you log the latest one in, it will log the last one out as well. And I believe you need an internet connection to actually log in as well there. So if you were, say, carrying 2 iPads and a phone in flight, it may log one of those out. I think, Nigel, whether you can confirm that, a lot of people are asking about this.
Yeah, absolutely right. And the other thing that many people realize is you can get a business account at SkyDemon, so you can actually have a single login with a / followed by a number. Like we've got a flying school that we operate at, we've got a single login with a / and then you can have obviously as many devices as you've got logins then as that goes to. So it's something they don't publicize because obviously their target audience is individual pilots, but they have got the capability to do sort of business logins like that.
Yeah, we do exactly that and use the / number for each device.
Good stuff. Wonderful. Right. We are, as mentioned, over time. A really quick canter through a variety of different electronic devices in the cockpit. Some takeaways: make sure you keep looking out, don't get sucked into the kit. And also, if you do have the opportunity to either use a simulator or actually play with it, for example, SkyDemon, by going to the tutorial videos, then it's well worth doing that and working out all the kinks before you get into the cockpit. So there are the 3 takeaways on that one. We do, however, hopefully you've been able to take something away from this evening. We certainly have in the preparation for this. If there is anything you'd like to revisit, a replay of the workshop will be sent to you via email with a list of resources also to support you. Once we finish tonight, a survey will pop up in your window. Please do take the time to fill this in, as your feedback is very important to us. If you're wondering what's next, keep an eye out for more details on our social media channels or through CAA Skywise or through the website www.astralaviationconsulting.com for future webinars that we are running for the rest of this year. We do, however, have to say goodnight this evening. We are over time. Thank you for your participation. We had loads of questions and loads of stuff in the chat box, which is brilliant. So I do want to say a big thank you to you all. I'd also like to say a big thank you to Matt, Dave and Nigel. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
And I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Good evening.
Take care.